overview of the float bowls on Morris Minor carburettors. So before I start this, I'm just going to say three important things. Firstly, this is dealing with petrol, and that comes with risk. So just be aware of that and think about the risk that you're taking when you're working around petrol. Secondly, that it has once been said very famously that 90% of problems with fuel systems and SU carburetors are actually in the ignition system. So think about looking at the ignition system before you think about looking at the carburetor, unless you're sure that the issue is lying in the carburetor. And thirdly, that when you start fiddling about with SU carburetors, you can start with a small problem, and if you're not careful, get a larger problem. So just be careful about what you do and when. Go through it piece by piece, nice and slowly, and then you'll be fine. So three types of float here. Let's start with this one over here. So this is an H series carburetor, and in it there is a brass float. So the H1 and the H2 carburetors have brass floats. They are different size floats, the H1 and the H2. They are interchangeable, but obviously if you have a slightly different size float, it will affect the volume of fuel that is held in the float chamber. Then you move on to the HS2. So this is an earlier HS2 float, and this one has got a set of forks on it. It's a nylon float with a set of forks on it there, and they're metal forks. If you move on to the later HS2, so this is a later HS2, it's fully nylon, and the connector is also nylon there as well. And if you were to buy a float today, they wouldn't be nylon. They would be made of a material, and I can't remember the name of it, which stops it from being perishable and also penetratable over time, because they found out that nylon is affected by ethanol. So if you were to buy one today, it's made by a special substance that means that it doesn't start to perish. So why would you want to take apart your float bowl? So you might have flooding. That is fuel coming up and over out of the float bowl. And you might find that you have rough running, and you've ruled out other issues. You've ruled out the main carburetor itself, you've ruled out the ignition system, and you think there might be dirt inside the float bowl itself. I'm going to concentrate on the HS2 because this is far more likely that you'll see an HS2 on a Morris Minor that you're working on. So 3 screws, flat bladed, and obviously you've got the pipe here. Now, if you only want to look at the top and you're going to do very little else, you're just going to raise it off, you could leave the pipe intact. But if you're going to do more than that, then you're going to want to undo the Jubilee clip that's attached to this pipe and then take the lid off. Obviously, you're doing this on the car. I'm not doing it on the car. I'm doing it off the car so I can show you. So I'm going to undo the 3 screws. They can be a little bit tight, particularly if they haven't been undone for a while. Okay, so there is, I'm going to invert it, and there is a gasket underneath. And you should really change this. If in any doubt at all, you should probably change this gasket. So as I was saying earlier, this is a fully nylon float. So the ones with the forks here, they can be adjusted. So the height of this float can be adjusted by bending the forks there. You can't do that with a nylon float that's fully nylon because it doesn't have any adjustment on it. So the adjustment is done in a slightly different way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take out this bar here because this will then release the rest of it so I can show you. Now to take this out, what you do is you get a pair of needle nose pliers here and you pull on the serrated edge, and that should separate the bar. Okay, so you pull on the serrated edge and that will remove the bar. So I'm going to put that down there. I've then got my float. I've then got the seat and the needle. Now it is the needle, and you can probably see that if I go really close there. It's the needle which pushes in and stops the flow of petrol. So the float rises up, it hits the needle, and it stops the flow. So where the float is sat will affect when the fuel is cut off. So you can then take out the needle which is inside, and then you've got the seat there. So I'm just going to get a socket and remove the seat. Okay, so I've got my little socket And I'm going to put it over the top there, and I'm going to unscrew it. They can be a little bit tight, and then you should be able to take it out. So if you think that you've got any blockages or anything like that, you can then clean these with carb cleaner, spray them inside and out. Same with the needle as well. You can clean those as well. If you've got the float, which is fully nylon, it doesn't have an adjustable arm on it. So the way that it would be adjusted is to put shims at the bottom here before you put the seat in. And you can get those, but that's what you would do. You'd put a number of shims in depending on how you wanted the seat to go. So I'm going to put that back in. Lovely. And then I'm going to put my little needle in here. So you've got the flatter side there. I'm going to put it that way around, and it goes in there like that. And then I've got my float. So I'm going to put that across there. And then I've got my bar, and the serrated edge goes on my right. So I'm just going to push that through. And there you go, I've got that fully through. Okay, so how do you know that you've got the right height? Well, the main thing is that you want the float to sit on the top of the needle. Not so that it's depressing it, but not so that it's away from it. And that's the main thing. So you don't want to get really, really het up about the measurement. However, you can measure the distance. What you would need to do this is you would need a drill bit. And you're talking about the flank of a drill bit. So I've got a drill bit there. If you've got a fully nylon float, then the measurement across the gap here should be somewhere between 1.5 millimeters and 4 millimeters. So I'm just going to put that there so you can see me sliding across there, and you can see that I can get that through. In fact, it's slightly smaller than that. I can just about slide that in without affecting it there. If you've got, and this one doesn't have a needle in it, so it's very difficult to show, but if you've got one that's got an adjuster on it, the measurement is slightly wider. So the measurement on this is normally, the bit you're measuring is this piece here, this point here. Here. Not the middle, the edge here in between the edge of the float and the bottom. And it's whether you can get a drill piece of the right measurement through. So on one with a metal adjustable arm, the measurement you're looking for between there is actually slightly deeper. It would be somewhere between 3 and 4 mil in between those two. However, again, it's not really about being fully exact. You want it to sit so it's just resting on the needle but not depressing it and not away from it. If you're unhappy with the measurement, you can use needle nose to bend the arm here, and you would bend it on the edge here. Don't bend it anywhere else, and that's how you make the adjustment. So, other than the float, the other bit that you would want to look at on a float bowl is the bottom as well. You can get sediment in them. Now, to clean it out, there's a couple of options. Is either to take it off the car, bit of a pain, possible to do. The other thing you can do is disconnect the fuel pump, run the car, and then it will run out of petrol, and then you won't have any petrol in here. The third option is that you can empty it by hand by getting something and absorbing the petrol that's in there, and then you can clean it all out. But either way, then you can clean right to the bottom, clean it all out with carb cleaner, and then you'll know that you've got a clean float bowl. So let's just put it back. So new gasket, float goes on the top, obviously with the fuel line end poking out. Make sure all lines up. And put me 3 screws and do them up, and I'll do them a little bit at a time so I've got even pressure across them all. So if you've got flooding, there are a few possible causes. One would be that the pressure from the fuel pump is too much, so you've got a different fuel pump than you had before, or a slightly different pressure fuel pump. The other is that the float is stuck. So it's possible that the arm that the float is on has got stuck, and so you need to take the lid off, clean it all, and make sure it's going up and down okay, or that the adjustment of the float is incorrect. And again, as I've said, you can check that as well and make sure that it's not too low, so it's not pressing on the needle. The other possibilities are that the needle is stuck, so it's got a grit in it or something like that, and the needle inside is either stuck open or stuck closed. If it's stuck open, obviously it's going to tell the pump to keep sending fuel. If it's stuck closed, then you're not going to get enough fuel through, and you obviously wouldn't get flooding, but you would get difficulty with running there as well. The other thing to look at on the float bowl is the float itself. So these are see-through, but if they weren't, and the later ones wouldn't, and obviously the brass isn't, what you're looking for is to make sure that it isn't perished and got fuel in it. And there's two ways you can do that. If it's see-through, you can see the fuel in it. The other thing you can do is shake it and see if you can hear fuel in it, and therefore it needs replacing. The other thing you can do also, actually there's another way, is that you can put it in water and see if you get bubbles around it to see if any cracks on it as well. The very modern floats that you can buy tend to not perish because they're made of a non-perishable material that can't be penetrated or perished. And there you go, the Morris Minor float bowl.